Hey guys, welcome back to Allmine Ranch. In this video, I'm going to share with you some of my strategic plans and how my thinking has changed for the order of operations for building my ranch. But I wanted to make this video as relevant as possible for everyone watching. So stay tuned if you want to see that and some of the build of my carport or the prerequisite steps for building walls before I start building my carport. But then at the end of the video, I'd like to share with you some of my thoughts on how to think about if you're either an off-grid homesteader or a homesteader, or heck, even an apartment dweller, to think about the order of operations of things based on what is the most important. In a previous video, I talked about the importance of focusing on the things that are gonna pay off, that are high return on your time, and what's most important for self-reliance and doing the best thing, the highest and best use of your time. But best is based on your particular circumstances and situation, right? So I just want to share some general principles at the end of this video that you could hopefully use to apply to your own situation. If you want to go right to it and skip over all the me showing you my plans for the carport and why I'm building it and the shape of the building and all that, there's timestamps in this video. You can just jump right to that. But stay tuned and you'll see what's cooking here at Allmine Ranch and the very next steps here on my homestead. So thanks for watching. Let's get into it. Caught up in circles, confusion is nothing new. Oh, hey everybody, welcome to Allmine Ranch. I'm Ryan. I'm an off-grid homesteader out here in Cochise County, Arizona. I'm coming up on a one-year anniversary actually of owning this property. I put in an offer about a year ago, and here in 2 weeks I will actually have closed on the property and been owner of it for a whole year, which is pretty amazing. Anyway, my initial plan was to get the tiny house here because I need a good space to live in while I'm doing my build. So it was tiny house as step one. Then step two, I thought I would build the garage so I had a workshop and a space for my tools and everything, which would give me a foundation, a strong foundation, to then go to step three, which was to actually build out the main house. But then I said, you know what, let's scratch that. Let's change the order here. Let's do the main house. And I thought it would take about 1 year, 1 YR. And then I said, let's come back and I can take my time building out the garage. And so that's been my order of operations in my head now for about the past 5 or 6 months. And I've definitely been doing a lot of work on the tiny house. I've done some work on the main house here to put in the subfloor and to do some blocking up in the attic and prepare the walls a little bit, things like that. But now my thought process has changed yet again. I'm going to take the numbers off here. The tiny house is pretty much done. That included doing a deck on it. I had to do the gray water drainage. I did a privacy fence. And now I've done a cactus garden off of the deck. And I've done some lighting and I've created a little fire pit and put in some chairs and, just things to make the deck livable and to tie the tiny house, to give me a space that ties the tiny house to the cactus garden and allows me to enjoy the outdoors. So that is pretty much all done. But monsoon season is basically in July and it's now early March. And they are predicting a pretty heavy monsoon season, possibly even a historic one. Apparently it has something to do with that volcano explosion in Tonga, which, by the way, I've been to Tonga. Not many people in the world can say that, but I actually spent 2 solid weeks in the kingdom of Tonga when I was in the Navy, when I was about 20 or 21 years old. We pulled in there for a while and I got to cruise around on a moped, rent mopeds and drink some crappy beer, mostly Foster's, which isn't horrible beer. The local beer was full of formaldehyde and will give you a bad headache. So we kept it to Foster's. But I spent a fair amount of time on Tonga. Anyway, the volcano exploded. Apparently it's caused some weather pattern shifts that may create a big monsoon year here in Arizona. So with all that said, there are earthworks to be done to control the flow of water. Some people call them berms and basins. Some people call them swales. Maybe a little retention pond. Plant trees. I don't know if you can see that. Might be a little off. Let's lower the camera. So all of these earthworks, while I don't have to have all of it done, having some of it done before monsoon season would be helpful. In order to do that, because the soil here is extremely rocky, I need a backhoe. Fortunately, Harbor Freight, I'm trying to talk slower and take more pauses, can you tell? Fortunately, Harbor Freight sells a backhoe that I can just barely afford at about $4,500. No, $3,500. But when you factor in, tax, shipping, they charge you another $300 or $400 for a tailgate truck that can actually lower this, 2,000-pound crate onto your land. But in order to buy that backhoe, I need a place to store it out of the elements. And I've mentioned this before. Right now, I have a motorcycle, I have a truck, and I soon will have this backhoe. It needs shelter, which means I need a carport, which has me going back to thinking about the order of operations. I can't do the garage. That is going to be a $60,000 to $100,000 venture. Like to really do it with a poured concrete floor, the size that I want. The electricity, the plumbing, I want to put a small bathroom in there perhaps. I can't do that yet, but what I can do is build off of it to create a good sized carport to house all three of those things, my truck, my motorcycle, and the backhoe. Okay, so now my order of operations is going to look something like this. Number 2, now that the tiny house is pretty much done, is going to be a carport for, again, my truck, my motorcycle, which I call a Momo, because a little kid I know used to call Momos, and the hoe, the backhoe, right? Then third, once that's done, and I think that's going to take about 2 months, then I'll come back and I'll work on the main house. I also thought that would take about 1 year to do the main house, but now I'm thinking, I'm going to give myself a year and a half, let's say 18 to 24 months from now. So we're looking March, fall of 2023 before this structure will be sufficient to really live in and enjoy. And then step 4, because I will be able to have this permit, the opt-out, the Cochise County opt-out permit for 40 years with a 1-year extension, 3 years with a 1-year extension. So then I will come back, probably tear down parts of all of the carport really, and then reuse the materials as part of a real and fully enclosed, full-size garage that will be able to hold my cargo trailer, utility trailer, truck, tools, a workshop, like everything. Okay, so let me just sketch for you sort of big picture. Let's say my main house is sitting right here. The main house is made up of 2 containers. We'll call it container 1. We'll call it container 2 with the space that I'm standing in right now between the 2 containers, okay? The third container, which is what I'll call a garage container, is actually sitting out here about like this. This would be container number 3. And when I first got here, it only had the end walls. It didn't really have side walls. Well, as usual, my camera battery died and I just had to swap it out. So I don't know how well the previous video went, but what I was explaining was if this represents my house in the 2 containers that make it up, and this is the space in between that I'm standing in right now, this would be my third container out back that I call my garage container. It's got a wall, half of a wall on one side, an end wall, and it had this other end wall. I've converted the back 4 feet into my solar utility closet, and I've got a series of videos on that and my solar setup. And this was unlevel. So I just spent the past week, it didn't take a week, but over the, here and there, over the course of the past week, I used bottle jacks to jack up one end of this container about 7 or 8 inches and get some railroad ties under it and get it level. That was a prerequisite in order to build the carport that I want to build off of this thing. So what you're going to see in this video and over the next few months, well, next month or so, I think it'll take, I'm making good progress, is I'm building in a back wall, framing in a back wall for this open section and putting in a door so that I have egress. And by the way, my tiny house sits right about there. There's the tiny house on wheels with my deck over on this side. And this is north. Okay, so I'm putting in a back door here. I'm framing in 12 feet of wall right here. That is being framed in, and that's what you're seeing in this video. And then the plan is to build a carport that essentially is offset by 5 feet. So it's going to extend out 5 feet from this far end. It's going to come over 12 feet. And then on this end, this wall is also in this video. Whoops, not 10 feet. This is a 12-foot wall right here. The carport is only going to come about 1 foot past it, and it's going to come out, the 12 feet. And so this is the roof of the carport with sheet metal for the roof. And then I'll have 4x4 sort of as the legs. It'll kind of come off of here like this. That will be a big timber right there. So I'll have the 4 corners down into the dirt. So I've got some hole digging to do and some cement works. And then I'm going to bring off my roof. And I'm going to use the same sheet metal that the previous owners left me. And this will be the side that I drive vehicles into. And this side will be closed. And this entire east wall right here will also be closed in. So it will become close to a garage, and then eventually I'll probably put a swinging gate door on here so that from the road, which runs along this side, this is a public street, you won't have a view into my container this way, and you won't have a view into the carport that way. This will be a solid wall, solid wall, solid wall. And back here, the reason I'm extending it out 5 feet is so I can put 2 IBC totes right there, and this the rainwater will drip down the roof, run along a gutter around the backside and into those IBC totes, and that'll give me another 700 roughly gallons of storage of water, since I didn't buy a massive cistern this year because prices were just so darn high. The lumber costs here and the metal cost to do this carport is going to be a couple $1,000s. So I just couldn't do the backhoe, the carport materials, and a cistern, and all of the other things that I needed to buy in the short term. So I'm sacrificing the cistern in order to buy a backhoe, because to me, doing earthworks is more important than collecting more rainwater. But I made a compromise by getting 2 IBC totes that will sit on the far end, and because there'll be a wall here, you won't be able to sort of see those from the street, and I could actually eventually turn that into a little shed so that there's not any sunlight falling on the water that could allow for algae growth or create algae growth or something like that. So that might seem confusing, but that is the rough plan. So I'm doing an offset carport by about 5 feet coming off the east wall of that container, and that is my big project for the next 30 days, working solo. And so that's what you're going to see in this video, and I hope that help you understand where I'm going with this project and what the next several videos will be about. So let me know what questions you have, because I'm sure I didn't clearly explain all of this and all of the plan. Maybe I'll include a site map image here in the video that might help you out a little bit. Right now, I'm really happy with how things are going. We are just now getting past our final freeze. Tonight, it's supposed to get down to 30. I think tomorrow night, it's going to get down to 28 or 29. But after that, I think we'll be in the clear for the next couple months. So I'm excited to work on the cactus garden, which is out here off of this deck area off my tiny house, get plants into the ground, maybe get a couple of trees going. That'll be great. And I've got a drone now and a trail cam. So hopefully, it's been too windy for me to actually try the drone out. I've never flown a drone before. It's a DJI Mini 2, and I don't want to crash it. And those little drones are not great in high winds that we've had here. So I'm going to wait for a very calm wind day where I can fly it for the first time and practice. But soon, drone footage is coming. That'll be cool. So then you can see all of this from the air, which will be great. All right, so this is from when I was laser leveling the container. You can see the big hole there on the right with the tiny house behind. That's where this door is going to go. So the first thing is I've got to start framing out and bolting framing members along the steel railings at the bottom and top, working around some temporary wiring. Now, it's interesting working with steel. There is a lip along the top there that I'm going to have to accommodate if I want to put my 2x4 stud. So there I am notching out the stud, which I then just stand up vertically, and then I take some quick clamps, clamp the studs to the metal frame, and then put some screws through it to go through the wood and into the actual metal. So there is a rough door opening. And now that I have a rough door opening, I can just sit the door in place and just make sure that that's the right spot and that everything is working. And it is. So now with the door in place, I can start bringing in cross supports for the metal siding to be screwed down to. So that's what you're seeing there is just some detail of some of the cross supports and the framing members. There the door is swung open. So obviously no carport yet, but in parallel to this, I'm starting to frame out, and you can see a corner post there of the carport. So I'm kind of switching back up and forth between, depending on my mood, doing carport and the back door. But now I'm starting to cut the metal. I'm putting the metal work up and sort of figuring out how to do above the door. I took a piece and turned it sideways to create myself a little rain lip there. And essentially this is what it looks like with the door in and the metal work complete. So it still needs a little bit of trim and some caulking, but essentially the back door is now done. So now I can start working on framing out the wall that is going on the carport side that will not be under the carport, but will block the view from the street and provide a little bit of security. And that is coming in the next video. Okay, so let's talk order of operations for you. If you have a project coming up, let's say you're considering buying property, or you've just bought some property and your head is swimming with the 10,000 things that you know you're going to have to do to build out a situation, or if you're just trying to become more self-reliant, like I've advised everybody in this day and age of cyber attacks and pandemics and civil unrest and all that, if you're just trying to become more self-reliant and then you've probably got some steps to take. And I talked in a previous video about the highest and best use of your time. I will link to that video down below. So if you haven't watched it, I very strongly recommend you watch that one. In fact, I think it's the best video I've ever put out on YouTube as far as usefulness and importance of having the right mindset. So if you're trying to apply that to your situation, it's hard to know what is the highest and best use of your time. Well, that really depends on your personal priorities, right? I used to be a student of Dave Ramsey, and he is a financial guru. He has a very simple premise that you need to, if you're in debt, you need to get yourself out of debt. And he's got 7 baby steps, as he calls them. And I'm not going to go into great detail on it. But his first step is to stop digging the hole deeper. Stop spending money you don't have. Stop putting things on credit, right? So staunch the bleeding. And then his step 2 is to create an emergency fund so that when inevitable emergencies happen, you don't dig the hole deeper. And then it goes on from there. Oh, lunch is ready. And then he builds on that from there. I'm not going to cover any of that. But there is some logic there that applies to your situation. So if you're trying to build out a homestead or just do your thing, it's very important that you think through your order of operations. But one of the things that you should prioritize really high on your list is emergencies, having an emergency fund, not a financial emergency fund. Well, that's important too, but to deal with emergencies that could happen on your property. That could be fire. It could be flood. It could, from like here in Arizona, we get monsoons, right? So it is mid-March right now. We just passed the spring equinox. I know come July, possibly earlier, there are going to be some, strong monsoons, or at least history tells us there will be, right? And that can cause flooding. So even though I have been dealing with getting my basic functionality of the tiny house, in your order of operation should be like bare bones functionality, right? You got power, you got water, you can function on your land, even if that's living in a tent or an RV or something like that. For me, it was first living in a cargo trailer and now in this tiny house. But now that I have my basic functionality, yes, I'm jumping into working on the main house and working on my garage carport situation, which this video is all about. But also, higher priority than that, I did some certain basic things about thinking through what calamities could befall me. And I put some time and attention on those things. And I want you to figure out what those things are for you and divert some of your time and resources to dealing with, a shit hitting the fan scenario. And I don't mean that in the prepping sense. I mean it in, well, let me give you examples. So the monsoon rains could come early. There could be windstorms. So I've got to think about both flood protection, which for me means doing some earthworks as early as possible, even possibly before I own a backhoe, to deal with and divert potential large volumes of rainwater. We've already had several red alerts from a high winds fire perspective, and there is, dry brush all the way around my property. So it could be something simple like having a garden hose on a pump to spray down your landscaping right around your structure to prevent the spread of a fire from catching your house on fire. If you can't do that, maybe it's just pausing to buy some fire extinguishers. I have border crossers. In fact, I had two guys visit my property and beg me for some water who were crossing the border on foot. I live about 3 miles from the border, so they made it this far. They were trying to get to Phoenix. And so I've also got human traffickers now driving up and down my street doing pickups of border crossers. So that's a whole nother video topic. But for me, that means there are some security concerns. So even though I want to build a house, maybe putting reinforcements on my door frame so the doors can't be kicked in is a high priority. And it is, and I've done that. And security in general. So those are just two examples of how thinking through potential emergencies can result in realizing there's actions that you can take, steps that you can take to prevent those emergencies or to deal with those emergencies. And I like to assume they're going to happen because there's no worse feeling than being aware of a possible issue, not dealing with it in advance, and then it happening to you. You're like, oh man, I should have done this or I should have done that. I know it's kind of sucks to take time out of your schedule and to focus on prepping or dealing with emergencies or worst case scenarios, but it is absolutely worth it to step back, to spend a day, an hour, maybe it's a week or a month, and whatever money you need to deal with the most likely emergencies. So before you then proceed with the more important stuff of building out or continuing with your project. So it's important for you to think through, well, what issues could befall me? What are my security concerns? Is it neighbors who steal? Is it border crossers? Is it maybe planting trees because you are going to grow food and you want to have a food forest, and because trees take time, suddenly planting of trees becomes an early priority. Then you can turn your attention to the building of your homestead. And after a couple of years, the trees, because you took the time to plant them up front, are starting to produce some fruit. Now, that's not an emergency, but my point is you've got to think through the order of operations, and some things that can have a big impact down the line are worth addressing up front at the start of the process. That's my point. And so hopefully by watching the video, you saw how I sort of think through my order of operations. I make adjustments continuously, but I always put the possible worst case scenarios fairly high on my priority list, and I do my best to try to address at least the basics up front. Security, fire, flood, theft, things like that are pretty important to me, and I hope they are to you too. Figure out what you could do now to ease your pain in the future, and then do those things. That's the highest and best use of your time. So keep that in mind when doing your homestead strategic planning. I hope you enjoyed the video. I'd love to hear your questions and comments or suggestions for more content. I've definitely got a lot of ideas swirling around up here. By the way, I'm at the 1-year anniversary of owning this property, so I think I'm going to do a series of before and after photos and just show you some of the major changes. Because since I'm here every day, it's easy for me to not notice how much progress I'm making. So I think it's good to step back and say, you know, look, here's a picture of the land when I first saw it, and here 1 year later, even though I haven't been working on it for an entire year, look at these changes, look at the progress, because it's actually pretty remarkable. I have done landscaping and some earthworks and got a tiny house here and got solar, water, IBC totes, you know, there's actually done a cactus garden, lots of little things. So anyway, great video coming up on that, sort of a 1-year anniversary retrospective. So make sure you subscribe, leave your comments, and I'll see you in the next video. Peace out.